Welcome to this panel. We wanted to talk about 3 unicorns. Unfortunately, one got lost at the airport in Zurich due to the snowstorm. But we're very happy to have Robert and Chris here representing Zalando, well known to all of you, and Chris from AUTO1 Group. He's COO and joined the group 3 years ago?
4 years ago, yeah.
4 years ago. I would like to actually start straight away. We want to talk about, of course, these 2 fantastic companies from Germany, made in Germany, but also about what they plan for 2018, what they faced on the way to become a unicorn, and later also talk about the threat from the big tech companies from the US and China, and also talk about international markets and new developments. So we hopefully cover a lot of topics that hopefully are interesting to all of you from an entrepreneurial point of view and from a general tech point of view. Chris, may I start with you, because I think AUTO1 now is known to many because of your latest announcements, but I would like to ask you to explain quickly what AUTO1's business is, and also talk about your latest fundraising, which is especially interesting because it is from SoftBank, and it would be also interesting to understand what SoftBank was looking for in your company.
Yeah. So I think SoftBank was, I think what brought us together with SoftBank is the fact that SoftBank has a similar vision on the evolution of mobility. And and as you probably know, SoftBank has a very long-term perspective. Their vision fund has sort of a 30-year perspective. SoftBank itself even has like a 300-year perspective on meta topics, so really, really long-term.
SoftBank's fund is $100 billion, just for the ones of you who don't know it.
Yeah.
Hear it.
And that sort of long-term thinking and planning clearly resonated with us, because we are also trying to have a long-term perspective on our business. And it's our declared mission to build a trusted and transparent marketplace for mobility, where all participants, be this end customers, dealers, all participants, can trade seamlessly through our platform with the highest degree of convenience and confidence. And I think SoftBank's deep investment expertise and technology expertise is going to help us a lot executing against this vision.
So today it's used cars,
yeah,
and tomorrow it's going to be?
I would say it's cars. Yeah, I wouldn't limit it to used cars, but clearly at the moment it's used cars, yeah.
So you can imagine to trade self-driving cars?
Yeah, I think we are sort of indifferent to what we trade. If it's self-driving, if it's electric-powered vehicles, if it's hydro, we don't care about the combustion engine. It's really just about the trade itself and making that more convenient.
And you raised 460 million.
Yeah.
Where's that money going to be invested in, mostly?
So I think we've expanded a lot over the last 4 years. We're now in 30-plus markets all over Europe. So from I think the most western one is Portugal, all the way to, I think the most eastern one is Ukraine by now. And we want to deepen that presence in these markets. There's still a lot of work to do, so a lot of the money will clearly be used for expansion. And then apart from this, we are constantly launching new products and businesses. So for example, we launched a business called Auto Hero, where you can now, as an end consumer, buy a car entirely online. So a model you're clearly familiar with. And then we've launched a remarketing business. It's a more complicated part of the used car trade, essentially B2B, where 35,000 of our dealers, anytime they have a need for liquidity, using AUTO1 as a clearinghouse, and then they take our software to evaluate the car in sort of less than 20 minutes. You have a digital data set of the car, you press a button, you upload it into AUTO1, and then 35,000 dealers theoretically can bid on the car, and whoever puts the highest bid on the car gets the car. And this is working all over Europe. So you could be a dealer in Spain. On a Friday morning, you do an evaluation, takes 20 minutes, you press a button, and then a dealer in Finland might buy it literally 2 hours later, and then it goes on a truck and is shipped all the way to Finland. Yeah. And another product, for example, is a private sale where We also now offer the customers the chance to sell the cars through classifieds, and then we're acting as the concierge for that trade, where we take the phone calls, we schedule the appointment, the test drive with the car, and we simply reduce complexity for you as a customer for a fixed fee, and that's also a product that's resonating well with the customer base.
Cool, thank you very much. We come to the international aspect of your business later again. Robert, you just announced that you're going to increase revenues by at least 25% in 2018. Tell us more about your plans in 2018, since we're early in the year and there are still some New Year's resolutions, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I think since the IPO we kind of said that we're following like a profitable growth path, which is like in the areas 20-25% growth a year, and that's when you're then a big company, then it adds up. Yeah, so like in this year we are planning to grow the company by about 1 billion in sales, net revenues, and obviously there's a lot of initiatives that we're going to follow, both on the kind of more short term, but as well long term kind of platform initiatives that we're executing now this year.
Can you be a little bit more specific without telling any secrets?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we already announced is that we're going to launch into beauty category, which is a kind of very good category to which our customers pretty much demand from us. If you're getting an entire outfit at Zalando, you can.
And a huge category, right? I read something like 20 billion euros in total of Europe for the beauty market.
Yeah, it's a huge category, and I think you can deliver lots of great consumers experience if you think this category a little bit more digital.
Well, in Germany, when you think of beauty and cosmetics, you think Douglas. How do you compete with Douglas? What do you want to do differently? As long as you can tell us.
Yeah, I think so. Soon you will see. Soon you will see what we're doing there.
Okay. I know that you travel a lot to China. My brothers and I tended to go to the US for new ideas. I hear and I see that you like to go especially to China. What is different in China? What new trends you see in e-commerce, in especially, but also in general, tech-wise? Do you see apps and also consumer behavior you haven't seen in Europe so far?
Yeah, I think the first time I went to China was about 4.5 years ago, which had the idea maybe we can start a business or like Zalando actually in China, and I think it was just amazing to see how actually platforms behave in China and how more advanced Chinese platforms, Chinese consumers are actually already at that stage. So I think a lot of these insights that we saw, how platforms actually think in terms of incentives of businesses in order to deliver great experiences. There was a lot more. There was a lot great of these insights that we then kind of took for Europe and we implemented as Zalando. I think what you currently see, especially from Alibaba and from Tencent, I think what is interesting for us is especially the push towards data-driven technologies, towards AI, and the second one that we kind of feel is as well very interesting is how actually Chinese ecosystem now works on integrating offline and online experience in a very meaningful way. Yeah? So you see Alibaba investing into grocery offline. You see a lot of platform initiatives now that how Alibaba actually helps offline business to succeed. But as well from Tencent, there's a couple of very interesting platforms that they offer now to offline business in order to actually get more digital in the future.
Is the Chinese consumer different from the European consumer, online consumer? And second question, are you still considering potentially going to China one day? And if so, what would it take to go?
Is the Chinese consumer different? I think obviously there are some different cultural traits in the Chinese consumers, and as well just with the language. Yeah? So you have so many different kind of kind of science there. The actual use of mobile phones is very, very different than if you have like an alphabet. Yeah, so there's a lot more like tendency to access the internet in a more convenient way than when you have just an alphabet, if you think about it. So there's natural tendency to go towards voice and so on and so forth. So obviously there are some of these elements which are different, but at the end, I think the experiences that evolved there in China will as well be here in Europe, because they're just, I think, like to my conviction, they're a lot more superior than what we currently have in Europe, in terms of e-commerce, in terms of platform incentives. So they're a lot more they're more meaningful. They make more sense. Would we go there into China? I think, like as a consumer brand, probably not. Yeah, so because that would mean like a significant investment into a consumer brand. If there's like great combination of of partnerships, then eventually we can think of something, but not like as a heavy investment into China.
Chris, any plans for China or Asia? And also, I know that you are busy in the US. What is your take on the US market for your specific business, but also since you have worked a long time as the international COO for Groupon in the US, you know the marketplace well. What is your take on the newest developments in the US in terms of apps, tax, new businesses?
So on the markets, I think we have a clear focus on Europe. For us, this is Western Europe and Eastern Europe for now. We look at emerging markets, we understand the ecosystems, we understand the players in the market. So we're constantly reviewing this, but I think for the time being, it's Europe and Europe only. And we're doing market tests occasionally in certain markets like the US. And what I see in the US scene, which is quite different from what I see in Berlin, for example, as a lot of the venture scene, or here in Munich, is I see more focus on software and software as a service. I think the European venture scene, from my perspective, is very e-commerce, trade focused still to this day. Partly you're actually responsible for this, so it's your legacy, I guess. And we need to have more players actually start building deep tech software. And generally speaking, I think the US ecosystem is more advanced to that degree. So if you go to the Valley, if you meet investors in New York, many of them are now focusing heavily on software as a service and have a different type of perspective on the investment in the cycle of it than when European investors see.
Coming to a different topic, because we wanted to talk about unicorns made in Germany. Are there any specific reasons why you think Auto1 became so successful? Because you started in Germany or you started out of Berlin? Would you do it again? Would you rather, if you could choose, start straight away in the US or even in China? And maybe you can comment also on some moments in the beginning and also during the hypergrowth phase where it was difficult or where you had to make important decisions. And so what can you share with this group of young entrepreneurs?
So I think Germany is a great country to start anything with automobile because, we're producing a hell of a lot of them. So it makes sense to start here. And the OEMs have done a good job of unifying the European market. So cars are very tradable across Europe, even all the way to Ukraine. So that's a good starting condition. So I think Berlin is great for this. I think Germany, generally speaking, is great for cars in general. So I think we already chose the perfect place. When it comes to different or difficult phases, maybe in numbers. Yeah. So in 2013, we had something like 80 employees. We were in 10 branches in Germany only, and in 2014, that skyrocketed to 600 employees and 8 other additional countries. In 2015, we opened up a new branch. I think 4 new branches actually every week. And then in 2016, we were 2,500 employees and trading 300,000 cars. So to be able to stomach that kind of growth and to actually become more efficient while you're growing, you need a strong focus on technology. So I think one of the things that's sometimes overlooked is that Auto1 is actually much more of a technology company than a car company. And we are able, because all the technology we're using along the entire value chain is proprietary tech that we are developing, that we can press on a button and say, what's the purchase conversion in Milan on a Friday morning between 8 and 8:55, yeah? Or we can say, how many appointments came in Lyon just now in the last 15 minutes on the click of a button. And I think that enabled us to grow to that extent while becoming more efficient while running, essentially. Yeah.
So I understand technology was an important decision, an important part of growing fast. How about the human side of things, leadership-wise or people-wise? What did you learn, and what would you maybe have done differently, or what do you think you made perfectly right in growing, especially since you said you grow the team so fast?
Yeah. So first of all, we are a team of three, my colleagues, Christian and Hakan, and I think we have a good separation of tasks, so everybody knows this area. That clearly helps with leadership, it helps with growth, because everyone has his clear responsibilities. And then I think, recruiting is incredibly important, right? You have to, and when you build this initial layer across the countries, you normally build up country MDs with a very rigid playbook approach, and these people have to be exceptional entrepreneurs themselves. So you have to be in a room and you have to convince somebody to join you on this mission, and you have to convince him that giving 5 years or 10 years of his life for your company totally makes sense and will be rewarding for him. So I think this is one very important aspect. You can only be as good as the next team under you. And if you're good in recruiting those people, if you're good in motivating those people, if you're in a constant dialogue with them, I think then you that's basically the only way I think you can manage that type of expansion, right? Because you know that from City Deal and other times, you have daily phone calls. You're constantly on the topic. Be it day and night, you're constantly talking to your main management team. And I think at AUTO1 we're very lucky because we have an exceptionally good management team that we are very proud of, and I think that has helped us to grow in that time frame.
And especially when going international, whom were you looking for in terms of candidates' profile? So
yeah.
At Groupon, we like the young McKinsey guys, the young Bain guys.
Yeah, it's always a good one.
What is this in your business for international? Or country managers?
I think consulting produces good people in a way. I think it's a good first starting point. At the same time, we are also an operational business, so we have branches, we have trucks to run around, we have people to evaluate cars. So you need to have people who are good in managing people directly on the front line, not just theoretically on a spreadsheet.
Give us an example. You're head of France.
So head of France.
What is his or her background?
Actually, one guy is from BCG, and the other guy is from Google. So both not necessarily known for frontline management, but those guys have it in them. And then we have, but for example, we also take industry people, like the guy who runs Spain, or one of the two guys running Spain, came from the biggest auction in Spain, Mannheim. So it's a mixture of consulting, digital companies, and partly also obviously car companies and car-related companies.
Robert, I would like to ask you too, where do you find your best people for your headquarters team, but also for international? What kind of profiles do these people have? And also in the early days, what kind of people did you hire, and what would be your recommendation for young entrepreneurs to look for in the first team, the senior team, but the core team, but also when going international, what kind of people to look for in specific countries?
Yeah, so I think what we have observed at Zalando was different phases where different kind of profiles actually matter. So we had a similar kind of growth back in the day. So in end of 2009, we were 50 people, and 2 years later, we were 2,500 people. Yeah, so in managing in such a pace, in an organization, that was very very difficult, where you need instant trust into your leadership team, yeah, because you suddenly, out of a sudden, US founders, you cannot really deal anymore with anything by your own, but you really have to implement a trusted layer of leadership. And in this first phase, what we learned was a good thing to do was to go actually with people that we actually knew from university. So we hired a lot of like our university class, and asked them to join our mission and help us. And that worked actually quite good, because like out of a sudden in the first moment we knew like how to work with them, and what they could do, what they didn't could do. So there was like an instant level of trust. So it was like the first phase, and then the second phase was once we were dealing with this amount of complexities in the business, with this amount of process in the business, and none of us really had like a lot of experience in managing organizations. So I think the first time I heard the term org chart was like, I think 2.5 years after we started it. So we actually didn't really have like any experience, and then we found as well these profiles actually from consultancies very useful, because they they had experiences in bigger companies, and they could deal with complexities in a good way.
And many of them were tired of traveling the entire week, so offering them a great company in Berlin also was attractive, right?
That helped as well, yeah. So we hired a lot of consultancies in, I think, in this 2010, 2011 era. And I think what actually those profiles are not so good at naturally is leadership, like in terms of creating trust with employees and working on the development of employees. So in that one, we found out was tricky in a longer term. So what we now do is pretty much that we hire more from a diverse background, more like from actually like bigger technology companies in the US, where we feel they have more experience in dealing with big technology teams. They know of how to manage innovation in a good way. They know of how to. They have experience in how to create efficiencies in bigger kind of technology organizations. So we have by today nearly 2,000 people working in technology. So and therefore, which is like a big investment for us, and therefore this is one of the main areas where we need like experienced leadership now.
Sure. And your hardest decision on the way up to the top, or the most difficult decision, or where in hindsight you are happy that you made the right decision, but at the time it was very difficult, or several decisions, or moments where you maybe had even doubts about, I don't know, the model, or...
Yeah, so I think like personally the toughest decision was actually to start Zalando. So that was tough one, because together with my co-founder David, we had before Zalando, we had to start up in Latin America, which failed. It was like personally very hard, and then like when you have like a lot of like personal debt and never really earned like a single euro of money in your life, then restarting again, that was like personally a very tough decision at that time, and it was actually very close. So luckily I did it. And I think then with Zalando, probably like the second, like one decision that we were not so comfortable with at that time, but in hindsight, which I think was the right decision to do, was in 2014 to manage the company towards profitability and then going public, because at that time we thought, if the culture of a company that is so much used to growing like more than 100%, then really focusing now on more like professionalism of the organization, and then taking it public probably can change the culture of the company very much. And we were not so convinced that this is the right thing to do. But in hindsight, I think it was the right thing to do, because in the end it didn't really change so much as we kind of as we feared at the time.
Chris, are you already managing Auto1 Group towards profitability, or are you still in hypergrowth, or how do you decide on that trade-off, and when do you want to switch into profitable growth maybe?
Yeah, we are still focused on expansion, as I said earlier. I think what I can say, and I don't think it's a secret, is that our German operation as such is profitable and sort of the blueprint for the other countries to come. But I mean, we still have a lot of market to capture right now. The used car market in Europe is somewhere in the area of 350 to 400 billion US dollars of annual trade, And so even if you trade several billions, you're still a tiny fraction of that market. And generally speaking, we have the philosophy of the more euros or the more dollars we can process through our platform, there will be a time where you then can work on profitability.
Has SoftBank expressed any interest in grow, and potentially go international? Or are they also more like, let's slowly but steadily improve profitability, so potentially we could go IPO or...
Yeah, I can't lay out everything that SoftBank went through their heads, obviously. But I think they like the fact that we are, as I said, we have a very common vision of mobility. We have a common view of that market. I think they like the fact that we have a huge footprint. And generally speaking, I think there's with having that very similar view, there's not too much to debate constantly. And we are very happy about the long-term perspective and also how they think about meta topics, what they bring to the table. That's definitely something that is interesting for us, and I think it's in a certain way unique.
Any interesting story about the negotiations with the Japanese? Do they have a different style? Or?
This was my colleague Hakan. You have to call him and ask him.
But he probably told you the funny stories.
I think he had to eat a lot of sushi over the last couple of weeks. But apart from that, I think he was in constant communication with them. I think Hakan, anyways, now very experienced in doing this. So I think, generally speaking, we are very happy with the investment. Yeah.
Cool. I would like to switch to competition and also looking at the big five, as they call them by now: Google, Amazon, Facebook, Alibaba, Tencent. Are they a threat to your business? Are they a competitor potentially or already today? How do you see them also in the general landscape? Because there are a lot of stories where young companies, new companies are saying, you know, I'm not getting funded. That's actually a notion, especially right now in the US. I don't get funded if I try to start a new e-commerce or m-commerce business, because every VC is so afraid of Amazon or Google going into this business potentially, and even Facebook one day. And of course, then they fear Alibaba or Tencent coming. So what is your competitive situation today? How do you see it tomorrow? How do you see the big five or other players coming into your field? Yeah. Or is your biggest competitor yourself? Are you competing against yourself?
Well, I think like with the companies that you mentioned, it's not like black and white. Yeah. So yes, obviously some of these companies, like they're a competitor, especially like in Amazon, is in retail obviously a competitor, but in some areas they're as well a partner. Yeah. So for example, in Amazon. Amazon as well has like web service, which we partly as well use. So it's not only like black and white in this space. And I think what is actually good for us is that it kind of forces us to focus really only on topics that really matter. Yeah. So in terms of consumer focus, and as well in the focus on our fashion and lifestyle space, which is a space which is extremely big, and which provides a lot of opportunities to provide additional value to business partners, like to fashion brands, and as well to consumers. So in this kind of focus actually is very good for an organization, because you constantly ask questions internally and make sure that everything is good in order. In terms of landscape, it quickly changes. Yeah. So you see as well, like some of the companies you mentioned, they're going into suddenly, like on Instagram, you see like that as well. People can buy directly on Instagram in partly in Asia and as well in the US. So it constantly changes. You constantly have to observe what happens in the market, and then as we actually position yourself correctly in this broader landscape.
Chris, do you see Amazon going into your field, since they saw it's an attractive, profitable field, and they go after everything and anything, especially since it's a huge category?
Oof.
Or one of the other big guys?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I have to say to that question, I think the fact that we have Zalando here, Delivery Hero, if it would have been here. And Auto One kind of shows the fact that these guys can't do everything. Yeah? There's always room for you to build a business. I think what's important is that the legislators keep it an even playing field. So I mean, if you look at what US companies have to deal with in terms of data protection, in terms of other legislation compared to most European countries and so on, it's certainly not necessarily an even playing field yet. And also if you see how well equipped certain governmental agencies are to even go into let's say a dialogue with those companies you're mentioning, I wonder if they have the competencies and the knowledge in-house at this point. I think that also has to improve. But apart from this, I don't think. I mean, as you said, the biggest competition is to ourselves is us. And if we don't stay focused on our mission, if we don't stay 100% sharp on what we want to achieve, then I think that could be a threat. And that's pretty much what we think about most of the time.
Robert, you're a member of the German Internet Foundation. Is there one point you would like to make or you would like to stress that either the German government or the EU Commission needs to address better today than tomorrow? Yeah,
I think if you actually ask yourself why is actually in Europe not yet really like a company, technology company out there which has like a 500 billion plus market capitalization as the companies that you mentioned. I think one of the major effects that we have in Europe is that there's like a natural kind of disadvantage in Europe. If you want to speak to 300 million consumers in Europe, you need to at least be in 10 different languages, and if you're in e-commerce, you even need to deal with different logistics providers. You need to have in some cases customs. So there's a natural kind of disadvantage for Europe already due to geography, due to what Europe is. Yeah? So I think in terms of if we want really like to develop big technology companies here in Europe, I think as a European system we need to kind of more think about how do we counter these natural disadvantages here in Europe and actually offer companies within Europe like more like benefits for actually being headquartered, being here in Europe in order to actually counter these effects. And I think like topics such as e-privacy, GDPR, I think it's probably we need to revisit like these topics a little bit more because they put a lot more kind of additional pressure on European companies, which like some of the other companies actually don't have, being such in so incredible big home markets such as China or US. And there they can train the algorithm, the AI algorithms, they can optimize their softwares. Which in Europe is kind of very, very hard, if you're faced exactly with those kind of topics all the time.
Thank you. I would like to open the panel to questions from the audience so that we hopefully answer some of your most urgent questions. Please. This one.
Hello, I'm Guy Horowitz with Deutsche Telekom Capital. An investment from SoftBank is now referred to sometimes as the new IPO, or it's a great way to raise a lot of money. I'd like to hear both of your perspectives on going public versus raising money from the likes of SoftBank. There are actually no likes. There's SoftBank with this amount of money. Is there a preference? Is there an advantage or a disadvantage for either route for a company that wants to grow?
I think you should take that.
The question was, what's our perspective on IPOs or
versus taking SoftBank money or big money and staying long and private?
I think like as Zalando, I think our approach towards IPO was probably like a very internal had a very internal reason because one of our shareholders was public, and we anyhow had a lot of like these regulations that with quarterly reportings and a lot of external kind of orientation due to the situation. So there was a lot of the disadvantage of being a public company we had already as Zalando without really having the benefits of price. So therefore for us it was like a different approach at a time. So it was more like to deal actually with the disadvantage we had and turn them actually into normal advantages. But we had as well big private rounds before that. So I think there's not like a very clear like which is better, which is not. I think it pretty much depends on the situation where the company is.
I agree with that.
There's one more time for more questions, Steffi. Yeah.
Since I see Stefan Leibler from the University of Bayreuth, the president, what can universities do to produce more founders?
I think that's a very good question, by the way. I don't have the answer, but I think one of the things I liked when I studied is that, the ability to, when the university was bringing entrepreneurs speaking to us, because it kind of, I come from a family of civil servants, so I'm the least likely entrepreneur you could possibly meet from my family background, and to see these people and to demystify the aura of founding and what's behind it, I think that for me at least it was very helpful. And I think the more exchanges you do and the more often you bring entrepreneurs and students together, I think that actually for me was extremely helpful at least. Yeah.
You have to take the advice, Stefan. Good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.